Imagine waking up one morning to find that $10 billion, not million, billion, of a company's value has simply evaporated into thin air. In December 2019, the London Stock Exchange witnessed a bloodbath that no one saw coming. The victim? NMC Health. The man at the center? Bavagathu Raghuram Shetty, better known as Br Shetty. For decades, Shetty was the golden boy of the United Arab Emirates, a man who allegedly arrived in the desert with nothing but $8 and a dream. He built an empire that provided healthcare to millions and reached the prestigious FTSE 100 index, rubbing shoulders with the world's most elite corporations. But behind the gleaming glass towers of his hospitals and the private jets, a darkness was festering. Reportedly, the books were cooked, the debt was hidden, and the cash reserves were nothing more than a digital illusion. This wasn't just a business failure, it was a systematic demolition of trust that would eventually reveal a staggering $4.4 billion in undisclosed debt. On that fateful day in December, a single report from a specialized short seller named Carson Block acted as the spark that ignited the entire powder keg. As the stock price plummeted by over 30% in a single session, the world began to realize that the Indian Bill Gates might actually be the architect of one of the largest corporate frauds in history. Investors watched in horror as their life savings vanished, while Shetty himself claimed to be a victim of his own management team. Was he the mastermind, or just a figurehead who lost control of the monster he created? To understand how a man could lose $10 billion in a matter of months, we have to go back to the beginning, to the year 1973, when a young pharmacist stepped off a plane into a world of heat and sand, unaware that he would one day own the 100th floor of the Burj Khalifa. But as the saying goes, the higher you climb, the harder you fall, and Br Shetty's fall was about to be terminal. To understand the gravity of the NMC Health collapse, you first have to understand the prestige that the company held in the Middle East. NMC Health wasn't just a business, it was the backbone of the private healthcare sector in the UAE. By the late 2010s, it operated over 200 facilities across 19 countries, treating millions of patients annually. Br Shetty was more than a CEO. He was a symbol of what was possible in the Emirati dream. He was reportedly the first person to see the potential of a private medical clinic in a region that was rapidly modernizing under the leadership of the Al Nahyan family. For 45 years, Shetty built a reputation of absolute reliability and philanthropic grace. He wasn't just in healthcare. Through his other company, Finabular, he controlled UAE Exchange, the most popular remittance service for millions of migrant workers sending money home to India and Pakistan. This meant that the financial security of an entire region was tied to the health of Shetty's balance sheets. In 2012, when NMC Health listed on the London Stock Exchange, it was a moment of supreme pride for the UAE. It was a sign that Middle Eastern companies could compete at the highest global levels, meeting the rigorous transparency standards of Western markets. By 2018, the company had entered the FTSE 100, placing it among the top 100 companies by market capitalization in the United Kingdom. This wasn't supposed to be a fly-by-night operation. This was a blue-chip stock, a safe haven for pension funds and institutional investors. At its peak, Shetty's net worth was estimated by Forbes to be around $4 billion. He lived a life of unimaginable luxury, owning multiple floors in the world's tallest building and a fleet of custom cars. Everyone wanted to be in business with him. Banks were practically throwing money at him, offering billions in credit lines with minimal oversight because, after all, he was Br Shetty. But while the world looked at the soaring charts and the ribbon-cutting ceremonies, a predator was quietly lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The legend of Br Shetty begins on May 3, 1973. He arrived in Abu Dhabi from Karnataka, India, during a period of intense heat and even more intense opportunity. Legend has it he had just $8 in his pocket and was struggling to pay back a loan for his sister's wedding back home. The UAE was a young nation, having only unified in 1971, and healthcare infrastructure was virtually non-existent. Shetty, a trained pharmacist, saw a gap in the market. In 1975, he opened the New Medical Center, or NMC, in a small apartment in Abu Dhabi. It was humble, but it was the first of its kind. Shetty worked tirelessly, allegedly acting as the pharmacist, the delivery boy, and the manager all at once. As the oil boom brought millions of expatriate workers to the Gulf, the demand for healthcare exploded. Shetty was there to meet it. He expanded aggressively, moving from small clinics to massive, state-of-the-art hospitals. His timing was perfect. By the 1980s and 90s, NMC had become a household name. But Shetty didn't stop at medicine. In 1980, he founded UAE Exchange to help the growing expat population send money home. This created a dual empire, one that cared for people's bodies and one that handled their life savings. The growth was exponential. By the time 2012 rolled around, NMC Health was ready for the big leagues. Its IPO on the London Stock Exchange raised $330 million, a move that was seen as a masterstroke. The stock price, which debuted around 200 pence, eventually rocketed to nearly 4,000 pence by 2018. Shetty was now a multi-billionaire, a kingmaker who was regularly seen with world leaders and Bollywood royalty. He spent $12 million on a single wedding for his daughter and planned to produce a $150 million movie about the Mahabharata. He was the man who had everything. He was the personification of the rags to riches story that every entrepreneur dreams of. The company reported record profits year after year, with EBITDA margins that made competitors jealous. However, behind the incredible growth figures and the expansion into specialized fields like fertility and oncology, a complex web of shell companies and creative accounting was being woven. The rise was spectacular, but the foundations were built on something much more fragile than the concrete of his hospitals. The first major crack in the facade appeared on December 17, 2019. Carson Block, the founder of Muddy Waters Research, published a scathing report that sent shockwaves through the financial world. Block is a man known for spotting corporate fraud, and he had NMC Health in his crosshairs. The report allegedly claimed that NMC's financial statements were manipulated, and that the company had significantly understated its debt. Specifically, Muddy Waters questioned why NMC was spending billions on acquisitions and capital expenditures that didn't seem to generate the expected returns. They pointed to suspect asset purchases at inflated prices, suggesting that money was being siphoned out of the public company and into private hands. Initially, the market's reaction was a mix of shock and denial. NMC Health issued a furious rebuttal, calling the Muddy Waters report false, misleading, and potentially speculative. Shetty and his board, including CEO Prasanth Mangad, attempted to reassure investors that everything was under control. They even launched an independent review to prove their innocence. But the damage was done. The stock price cratered by 30% in a single day, wiping out billions in market value. Investors began to look closer at the board's composition and the unusual loans taken out by the principal shareholders. It was revealed that Shetty and his associates had pledged their NMC shares as collateral for loans, a move that is often a red flag for liquidity issues. As the share price fell, these lenders began to sell off the pledged shares, creating a downward spiral that was impossible to stop. By early 2020, the company's CFO and several key executives were under intense pressure. It wasn't just Muddy Waters anymore. Major banks like Barclays and Standard Chartered were starting to ask where their money was. The independent review that was supposed to clear NMC's name was about to uncover something far worse than anyone, even Carson Block, had imagined. The cracks were no longer just on the surface. The entire structural integrity of the company was failing, and the man at the top was about to vanish. In March 2020, the nightmare became reality. The independent investigation, led by former FBI Director Louis Freeh, reportedly discovered that NMC Health had a staggering $4.4 billion in undisclosed debt. To put that in perspective, the company had previously claimed its debt was around $2.1 billion. In an instant, the company's liabilities had more than tripled. The investigators allegedly found evidence of fraudulent checks, forged documents, and a massive supply chain financing scheme that had been used to hide the borrowing. It was a sophisticated operation designed to deceive auditors and investors for years. The board of directors quickly fired CEO Prasanth Mangad and suspended several other executives. Br Shetty himself resigned from the board, claiming he had no knowledge of the fraud and that his signatures had been forged. But the market wasn't buying it. By this point, the London Stock Exchange had suspended trading of NMC shares. The company, once valued at $10 billion, was now effectively worthless. On April 9, 2020, the High Court in London placed NMC Health into administration, a move equivalent to bankruptcy. This was a catastrophic blow to the UAE banking sector, as local banks like Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank, ADCB, were exposed to over $1 billion in bad debt from NMC alone. As the authorities moved in, Br Shetty was nowhere to be found in the UAE. He had reportedly flown back to India in February 2020, citing personal reasons and the health of his brother. He claimed he intended to return and clear his name, but many saw it as a tactical escape from the jurisdiction of the UAE courts. Back in Abu Dhabi, the scale of the disaster continued to grow. It wasn't just NMC, his other company, Finabuller, was also collapsing under the weight of $1 billion in hidden debt. Thousands of employees were left wondering if they would have jobs, and healthcare services were only kept running through emergency government intervention. The fallout was global. Banks in the UK, the US, and the Middle East were all caught in the web. It was revealed that the fraud had allegedly been going on since at least 2012, the very year the company went public. Every financial report issued for nearly a decade was a lie. The golden boy of Abu Dhabi was now a wanted man, facing lawsuits and criminal investigations in multiple countries, as the house of cards he spent 40 years building was reduced to a pile of legal filings and angry creditors. Today, the name Br Shetty is no longer synonymous with success, but with one of the most brazen financial scandals of the 21st century. As of 2024, Shetty remains in India, fighting legal battles on multiple fronts. He has consistently maintained his innocence, allegedly claiming that he was the victim of a massive fraud perpetrated by a small group of executives who siphoned off billions without his knowledge. In a 2020 statement, he said his own investigation found that bank accounts were opened in his name and checks were forged. However, the Abu Dhabi Global Market (ADGM) courts and the UK administration process have largely moved on from his excuses. NMC Health's core business was eventually restructured and sold, with creditors taking control of the remaining assets to recoup pennies on the dollar. The total debt uncovered eventually reached a peak of $6.6 billion. The scandal forced the UAE to radically tighten its corporate governance and auditing regulations to prevent such a disaster from happening again. For the investors who lost billions, there is little hope of full recovery. Prasant Mangat and other key figures remain under investigation, with legal proceedings stretching across London, Abu Dhabi, and India. Shetty's vast fortune has been frozen by courts globally, and his dream of becoming a movie mogul or a savior of Indian healthcare has been permanently extinguished. The collapse of NMC Health serves as a haunting reminder that even the most prestigious, too big to fail, companies can be hollowed out from within. It highlights the critical importance of short sellers like Muddy Waters, who often act as the only line of defense against corporate deception. Br Shetty started with $8 and ended with a debt of $6 billion. A tragic arc that proves that in the high-stakes world of global finance, nothing is ever quite as it seems. But as the dust settles on this $10 billion ghost, one question remains. How many more blue-chip giants are currently hiding their own multi-billion-dollar secrets?